In the heart of a forgotten forest, where mist clings to ancient trees and silence reigns, stood a monastery untouched by time. It was to this remote sanctuary that Sister Leora, a young novice with faith as bright as her spirit, arrived. The monastery appeared serene, its stone walls echoing with centuries of prayer. But from the moment she stepped through the gates, Leora felt a subtle chill, a whisper in the air that vanished when she turned to listen, a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye. She began her new life, a cycle of devotion and service, assisting the elder nuns. Yet the peaceful routine was punctuated by small, unsettling oddities. A prayer book, left on a lectern, would be found on a dusty shelf in the library. A door she had just closed would be found ajar. The shadows in the long, vaulted corridors seemed to dance and stretch, defying the gentle candlelight. Soon, the Ennies followed her into her sleep. Leora's dreams became a labyrinth of twisting hallways that led nowhere, filled with the faint, persistent whisper of her name. She'd see fleeting glimpses of figures draped in shadow, their forms indistinct but their presence heavy. During the day, she would fall into moments of silent distraction, her gaze lost in the distance, her lips sometimes moving to form words not her own. The other sisters noticed her change. Her once vibrant energy was now muted, replaced by a constant, quiet vigilance. An elder nun, wise to the monastery's deep history, watched Leora with growing concern. She felt an unnatural presence clinging to the young novice, a cold spot in the warmth of the sacred space, but its origin remained a mystery. The disturbances began to ripple outward, disrupting the monastery as a sacred calm. Heavy leather-bound books would tumble from high shelves with no one near them. Rows of candles, lit for evening vespers, would extinguish all at once, plunging the chapel into sudden darkness, only to reignite moments later. The shadows grew bolder, no longer just flitting at the edge of vision but moving with purpose against the light, like ink spilling across the stone floors. More alarmingly, Leora started speaking in phrases she couldn't understand, her voice sometimes dropping to a low, guttural tone that sent shivers through the other nuns. The once comforting halls now felt oppressive. Familiar archways seemed to narrow, and corridors appeared to lengthen and distort, as if the very architecture was being warped by an unseen force. The monastery was no longer just a building. It felt alive and it was watching. Haunted by day and tormented by night, Leora began to see a pattern in the chaos. The fragmented visions from her dreams, cryptic symbols carved into stone, the faces of nuns from a forgotten era, and the echoes of sorrowful chants started to form a coherent, terrifying narrative. She decided she could no longer bear the weight alone, and confided in the elder nun who had been watching her. The wise woman listened patiently, her expression not of fear, but of somber understanding. She didn't believe it was a malevolent demon, but a restless spirit, a shadow from the monastery's past, drawn to Leora's spiritual sensitivity. Together, they delved into the archives, unearthing dusty journals and faded records. They discovered they were not the first. Generations of novices had reported similar experiences: whispers, moving objects, and a profound sense of being watched. The monastery, it seemed, held on to the memories of all who had walked its halls. And this particular shadow was desperate to be remembered. Armed with this new understanding, the elder nun proposed a different approach. Not an exorcism, but a ritual of acknowledgement. They would not fight the presence, but listen to it. That night, guided by candlelight, they descended into the oldest, forgotten parts of the monastery. They lit candles in dusty, unused chambers, and finding the journal of a novice from centuries past who described the same haunting phenomena, Leora began to read the words aloud. Her voice, though trembling, filled the silence, offering a bridge across time. As she read, the activity around them intensified. Doors slammed shut in distant corridors. The floorboards above creaked as if under heavy footsteps. The whispers grew from a faint murmur to a chorus of overlapping voices, swirling around them in a vortex of sound. The air grew thick and cold. Yet, through her fear, Leora focused on the words, on the shared experience of the girl who wrote them. She felt the presence respond not with anger, but with a wave of profound loneliness and sorrow. It wasn't a monster. It was a soul lost and desperate to be heard. As dawn approached, a profound stillness settled over the monastery. The ritual was complete. The whispers softened into silence, The shadows retreated to the corners where they belonged, and the oppressive weight in the air lifted, replaced by a sense of calm the halls hadn't known for weeks. Peace had returned. Leora emerged from the ordeal, not broken, but transformed. Her faith was no longer simple and bright. It was deep, resilient, and forged in the crucible of fear. She now understood the monastery's secrets, a silent guardian of its lingering souls. The strange occurrences ceased, and life returned to its peaceful rhythm. Yet, sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, as the last light faded from the stained glass windows, Leora would catch a glimpse of a flicker in the periphery, a deep shadow in a far corner of a hall that seemed just a little too dark. A silent, eternal observer. The presence was at peace, but it was not gone. It was simply watching, waiting, a permanent shadow in the habit. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell for more tales from the shadows. The convent of St. Augustine was always a place of quiet contemplation, a sanctuary sealed off from the noise of the modern world. Its stone walls had absorbed centuries of prayer, echoing with the soft hymns of devoted sisters. But that peace shattered the day Sister Miriam vanished. One moment she was in the gardens, tending to her beloved roses. The next, she was gone. No note, no sign of a struggle, just an unnerving void where a kind and diligent soul used to be. The halls, once filled with a gentle calm, now felt heavy, cold, as if the very stones of the monastery were holding their breath, mourning her absence. The other nuns tried to maintain their routines, their prayers a little more desperate, their gazes a little more anxious. But it was impossible to ignore the silence that screamed her name. It started subtly, almost dismissibly. A door in the scriptorium, always kept shut, would be found slightly ajar. Faint footsteps, like the soft tread of Sister Miriam's worn sandals, would echo down an empty corridor just after midnight mass. Lights in the chapel would flicker and die for a moment before humming back to life. At first, the sisters blamed drafts, old wiring, their own overwrought imaginations. It was easier than confronting the alternative. But the strangeness grew, weaving itself into the fabric of their days and nights. Then came the sightings. Sister Beatrice, while polishing the silver in the refectory, caught a glimpse of a figure in the periphery of her vision, a nun's habit, a familiar shape. She turned, expecting to see a fellow sister, but there was no one there. Yet, for a fleeting second, she could have sworn it was Sister Miriam, her form pale and distorted, like a reflection on water. Others began to report similar experiences. A shadowy figure moving silently at the far end of the cloister, always just out of direct sight. At night, whispers would snake through the dormitories, so soft you could mistake them for the wind. But sometimes, a name would be called out, a single, clear word that would jolt a sister from her sleep, her heart pounding in the suffocating darkness. Objects started to move. A prayer book left on a pew would be found on the altar. A rosary would be draped over a doorknob. It was as if an unseen hand was tidying up, or perhaps trying to get their attention. The anxiety was no longer a quiet undercurrent. It was a palpable, living thing that stalked the convent. Even the most stoic nuns began to feel the constant, unnerving sensation of being watched. The spectral presence grew bolder, more intense. It was no longer content to linger in the shadows. Sister Clara was praying alone in the small oratory when every candle in the room suddenly extinguished, plunging her into darkness. A freezing gust of wind swept through the room. Though the heavy oak door was sealed shut, she fumbled for her matches, her hands trembling, her prayers turning into frantic pleas. Mirrors became objects of terror. Several nuns reported seeing a brief, ghostly image in the glass knot. Their own reflection, but the sorrowful, pale face of Sister Miriam, her eyes wide with a silent warning. Soon, entire wings of the convent were avoided after dark, especially the areas where Miriam spent most of her time. The whispers at night were no longer just soft murmurs. They grew more distinct, weaving through the stone hallways. Sometimes, they seemed to repeat fragments of conversations from the past, memories of happier times. Other times, they were cryptic warnings, words like sealed and forgotten and below, leaving the nuns to wonder what they meant. The convent had become a prison of fear, its silence now filled with the chilling sounds of the unseen. Not all were content to live in terror. Sister Agnes, a woman whose faith was as solid as the convent's foundations, refused to be cowed. She believed that answers lay hidden within the monastery's long history. Gathering a few other brave sisters, she began a quiet investigation. Their search led them to the convent's archives, a dusty, forgotten library of old records and journals. There, they found unsettling patterns. Every few decades, a nun would disappear without a trace. The descriptions were eerily similar. A sudden vanishing, followed by strange occurrences, but their most significant discovery was a series of journals belonging to a long-deceased abbess. She wrote of a sealed-off wing in the oldest part of the convent, a place that housed relics from the founding of the order. This wing had been closed for over a century due to what she described as a restless presence astariadon. A horrifying truth emerged. Sister Miriam, an avid historian of the convent, had been researching these same disappearances. Her private notes, which they found tucked away in her cell, showed she had become obsessed with the sealed wing. She believed the missing sisters were not gone, but trapped, their spirits bound to the relics within. It became chillingly clear. Miriam hadn't just vanished. She had been drawn into a cycle, a haunting that had repeated for generations. Another soul claimed by the restless entity tied to the very heart of the convent. Armed with this terrifying knowledge, Sister Agnes knew they couldn't fight this presence with force. It was too old, too intertwined with the convent itself. Instead, she proposed something radical. They would not banish it, but acknowledge it. They would try to communicate, to understand its pain, and, in doing so, guide Sister Miriam's trapped spirit toward peace. They prepared a ceremony in the main chapel, placing a single, unlit candle on the altar for Miriam. As Sister Agnes led the others in a series of prayers and meditations, the atmosphere grew thick and heavy. The air turned icy cold. The tension was unbearable. Then it began. A distant door slammed shut with the force of a thunderclap. Shadows in the corners of the chapel seemed to twist and writhe, elongating into grotesque, unnatural shapes. The whispers escalated into a cacophony of voices, a storm of sorrow and anger swirling around them. The chapel doors burst open, and a spectral wind howled through, extinguishing every candle except the single one on the altar. In that moment of peak chaos, the unlit candle for Miriam flickered, and then ignited on its own, its flame burning with a soft, ethereal light. In the glow, a figure began to form. It was Sister Miriam, but her form was no longer distorted. Her expression, once one of terror, was now calm, almost serene. She looked at Sister Agnes, a silent message of gratitude passing between them. Slowly, her form grew translucent, fading like mist in the morning sun, her spirit finally finding its way toward peace. The convent returned to a semblance of normality. The phantom footsteps ceased, the whispers faded into the stones, and the heavy feeling of being watched finally lifted. The sun seemed to shine a little brighter in the gardens, and the halls felt like a sanctuary once more. But the Coam was different now. It was not the innocent peace they had known before, but a fragile, quiet, layered over a deep and unsettling truth. The nuns now understood that their home was not just a place of prayer, but a vessel for history, holding the echoes of every soul who had ever walked its halls. They were never truly alone. The story of Sister Miriam became a quiet legend, a reminder that the past is never truly gone. And sometimes, on a late evening, when the last light of day paints long shadows across the floor, a nun might catch a fleeting movement at the end of a distant hallway, a flicker of black cloth, a silent figure turning a corner. A chilling reminder that some presences never fully leave, and that the echoes of the vanished are always watching, always waiting. Thank you for joining me on this chilling journey through the halls of St. Augustine. If you enjoyed this tale of suspense and a haunting that never truly ends, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories that explore the shadows. What do you think happened to the other missing nuns? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Stay safe, and always be wary of the echoes from the past. The ancient convent welcomed Sister Amelia with a shroud of mist and silence. It stood alone, a stone relic surrounded by whispering woods, its halls echoing with a quiet solemnity that felt heavier than reverence alone. Almost immediately, she noticed the inconsistencies in the quiet. Soft, indistinct whispers seemed to curl from the corners of empty rooms. Footsteps, light as falling leaves, would patter down corridors she knew were deserted. and in the periphery of her vision, shadows would dance and flee, too quick to be anything but a trick of the light. Or so she hoped. Amelia's curiosity, a trait she was meant to temper, led her to the convent's dusty library. There, tucked away on a forgotten shelf, she found them. Old, leather-bound journals filled with the elegant script of nuns long past. As she turned the brittle pages, her breath caught. The entries described the very things she was experiencing: unexplained events, whispers on the wind, and a feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. Certain areas of the convent were mentioned repeatedly, places that felt colder, where the air was thick with a palpable sense of history. An elder nun with eyes that held a century of secrets once remarked cryptically that some stones in these walls remembered more than others, hinting at a long history of mysterious happenings that were simply accepted as part of the convent's character. Driven by the words in the journals, Amelia began to dig deeper. She learned the convent wasn't the first structure to stand on this ground. It was built upon ancient foundations, a place that had housed many souls over countless generations. This knowledge unlocked something within her, or perhaps within the convent itself. The fleeting shadows began to take shape. She started seeing them: faint, translucent figures of nuns from bygone eras, gliding through the gardens or kneeling in the chapel. They were going about their daily routines, their movements gentle and repetitive, like a memory caught in a loop. These spirits were not malicious. There was no malice in their ethereal forms. Instead, they seemed restless, their silent repetitions a desperate, unspoken plea to share the stories they held. They were ghosts of memory, yearning to be seen, to be remembered. Amelia's connection to this unseen world grew stronger each day. Her dreams became a tapestry woven with the convent's past. She would walk the halls, not as herself, but through the eyes of Sister Annalise from the 18th century, or feel a chill of a winter morning as Sister Claire from 100 years before her. The whispers were no longer random. They coalesced into a gentle guidance, leading her toward forgotten placiza, sealed-off scriptorium, a hidden alcove behind the sacristy. With each discovery, she understood more. The spirits weren't trying to scare her. They were trying to speak to her. They were seeking recognition, a validation of their lives and their faith. They were lonely echoes in a world that had forgotten their song, and they had chosen her as their confidant, their bridge to the present. Understanding dawned on Amelia like the morning sun through the stained glass windows. She knew what she had to do. It was not an exorcism they needed, but an embrace. She organized a special ceremony, a ritual of remembrance. In the heart of the old chapel, she lit a candle for every nun mentioned in the journals she could find, surrounded by her fellow sisters. Her voice filled the hallowed space as she read the old entries aloud, stories of joy, of sorrow, of unwavering faith, of simple lives lived with profound purpose. As the words filled the air, a palpable shift occurred. The whisper softened, transforming into a gentle, harmonious hum. The faint, ghostly figures appeared, clearer than ever before. But this time they were peaceful. A serene light seemed to emanate from them, their restless energy replaced by a calm acceptance. The convent, once heavy with secrets, now felt light, filled with a quiet, shared peace. Amelia felt a profound connection, a sense of belonging not just to her community, but to the entire lineage of faith that had preceded her. In the weeks that followed, the convent returned to a state of deep serenity, but it was a new kind of quiet, not empty, but full. The spirits were at rest, their stories told, their memories honored. They were no longer restless echoes, but silent guardians, a comforting presence woven into the very fabric of the convent walls. Amelia, for her part, was transformed. She carried the lessons of the past with her. Her compassion deepened by the understanding that every soul leaves a trace. Every life is a story worth telling. Her faith was no longer just about the future, but about honoring the continuum of history she was now a part of. And sometimes in the deepest quiet of the night, when the moon cast long shadows through the cloister, she would hear it. Soft single whisper, a gentle reminder that the convent's history is always present, forever watching over those who call it home. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the whispers of the past. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more tales from the quiet corners of history. We'd love to have you in our community. Until next time.